David emerged from a Christian lineage, but the shadows of betrayal loomed large. His parents adored him, instilling in him the fierce power of faith. They sat in silence every Sunday, masks of devotion hiding the storm brewing within. David observed them, but with age came defiance and a thirst for retribution. Defying his parents' teachings, David plunged into a whirlwind of fleeting romances, seeking thrills over values. He reveled in the chaos, dancing through life without a care, but the shadows of betrayal loomed closer. His parents saw the change and felt a surge of dread. They always said, "David, stop this madness and surrender to God." But they had no idea what he was capable of. "Consider stepping into the role of a pastor." David turned a deaf ear. "That's not my life," he would snap back. He craved freedom, a life unshackled by burdens. One day, David's mother confronted him, her eyes heavy with sorrow. "David," she spat, fury burning in her eyes. "I loved you once. Now I crave your downfall. Change or face the consequences. Your fate hangs in the balance. I could do something drastic. Watching you waste your life is unbearable." David's heart shattered at her words. The thought of losing his mother ignited a fire within him, a fierce determination to fight against fate. This ignited a fire within him, forcing him to confront his choices head-on. He understood that transformation was essential, not only for his own sake but for the sake of his family as well. With a heavy heart, David surrendered everything to God, but the fire of his spirit burned brighter than ever. His mother felt a surge of relief, but beneath it simmered a fierce gratitude that hinted at deeper emotions waiting to erupt. "Thank you, David. I always knew you'd return," she said, squeezing him fiercely. After countless talks and relentless pressure from his parents, David finally surrendered, vowing to dedicate his life to God and step into the role of a pastor. He opened a church and for a moment it felt like victory was his. But beneath the surface, darkness brewed. They flocked to his church, hanging on his every word about faith and kindness. But little did they know, his heart burned with a desire for vengeance. His parents beamed with pride, but David's joy masked a brewing storm within him as he watched the church thrive, unaware of the reckoning that awaited. But soon, everything shifted. A new contender has emerged. Pastor Jerry, a man of God, has opened a church nearby. The church was overflowing with souls, each one seeking salvation, but little did they know the storm brewing beneath the surface. He rose to fame for his miracles, drawing the faithful away from David's church, igniting a fire of betrayal and fury. Whispers of miraculous healings, answered prayers, and vanishing troubles echoed in the air, igniting a fire within. They craved miracles, and Pastor Jerry's church promised them. But what they didn't know was the price they would pay. As the last few souls slipped away, David's church echoed with the haunting silence of betrayal. The chairs that once thrummed with life now stood empty, a haunting reminder of what was lost. David seethed with disappointment and dread. He questioned everything, a storm brewing inside, wondering if he had been a fool all along. He didn't work wonders in his church. He unleashed the raw power of faith, love, and the fight for a life worth living. On that fateful Sunday, just a handful dared to attend his service. David's heart plummeted. His confidence was crumbling, and he could taste the bitterness of betrayal. He seethed within, questioning if he was ever worthy of the title of pastor. "Perhaps they fear the truth I hold." David faced his parents that night, a storm brewing within him. His mother noticed the storm brewing in his eyes and demanded, "What's eating at you, David?" "Mom, they're all walking away. They're heading straight for Pastor Jerry's church. He works wonders while I remain in the shadows." "I'm done feeling weak," David shot back. His mother listened intently, then declared, "David, do you remember the fire that ignited this journey? It was never about miracles. It was about unleashing the power of love and faith, a force that could shake the very foundations of betrayal. Fate has a twisted design for us all. Believe in him, and he'll reveal the path, one that leads to reckoning." David seethed, her words echoing in his mind like a battle cry. He understood he had to fight for his purpose, no matter the cost. David chose to fight back, refusing to surrender. Each morning, he rose before dawn, stepping into the world to deliver his message to anyone willing to hear it. He stormed through the streets, shouting about God's love and forgiveness, determined to snatch souls for his church, fueled by a burning desire for redemption. One morning, As he delivered his fiery sermon, a woman stormed toward him. Once his fiercest ally, she betrayed him, abandoning his church for Pastor Jerry's. The sting of her defection burned deep. She glared at David, disbelief etched on her face. "Look at you, Pastor David," she spat. "You wear the title of pastor, yet where are your miracles? I once walked through your church's doors, but I turned away. Your church is a hollow shell, drowning in meaningless chatter. At Pastor Jerry's church, miracles come alive." David's heart burned with betrayal, yet he fought to keep his composure. "Pastor Jerry's church may be a magnet for miracles, but I see through the facade. The message of God transcends mere miracles. It's a battle of faith, love, and trust in God even when the signs are hidden. But wait. There's a reckoning coming." She laughed, a sharp sound, and shook her head, defiance radiating from her. "Miracles scream of God's presence," she declared with fierce conviction. "If you truly served God, you'd unleash miracles of your own. I walked away from your ridiculous church for good." David's heart plummeted. He poured his heart into his church, striving to make it a haven, yet deep down, he understood that he couldn't bind anyone to it against their will. He begged for her return, but her answer was a fierce no. She turned to him, fire in her eyes, and declared, "If you want souls in your church, unleash God's power." Then she walked away, leaving him to grapple with the truth of her words. Words will never suffice. After she left, David stood there, a storm brewing inside him, ready to unleash his fury. Those words haunted him, igniting a fire of doubt that burned deep within. "Perhaps she has a point," he seethed. "They'll doubt my message until they witness the impossible. Let them wait." David was seething with fury. Stung by her cruel words, he stormed home, seething with frustration and exhaustion. That night he faced his mother, eyes blazing, and declared, "Mom, I'm finished. This is not the life I deserve. My church is losing its people. They claim I lack divine strength for not conjuring miracles. They've all abandoned me. It's over." His mother fixed him with a fierce gaze, her voice steady. "David, this is brutal, but you must rise. Strength and patience are your weapons." Rome took time, but its rise was unstoppable. Your church will rise, and those who doubt it will regret it. Believe fiercely and never back down. But David was consumed by his rage, deaf to all reason. Fury ignited within him as he shook his head, rising with purpose before storming out, leaving everything behind. He strode through the desolate streets, a fire igniting within him, fueled by the pain of betrayal. His mind churned with questions, doubt clawing at his resolve. He questioned if he was ever meant to wear that collar. Under the cold glare of the moon, he walked alone, when an old man materialized from the shadows, igniting a fire within him. David was jolted awake. The man wore wisdom on his face, his hair and beard a fierce white, eyes glinting with secrets of vengeance untold. "David, my son," the old man said, his voice steady and piercing, "I see the weight of your worry, and it won't go unanswered. Reveal your pain." David was blindsided. This man was a stranger, but not for long. "Who do you think you are?" he demanded. The old man grinned, a glint of something dark in his eyes. "I'm here to help you," he said, but the weight of his words hinted at a deeper, more twisted purpose. "I see your church, and I see the lengths you've gone to. But it won't be enough. Listen closely, David. Pastor Jerry wields extraordinary powers, healing the sick and conjuring miracles with fierce determination. His strength is fueled by something far darker than belief. To fill your church like Pastor Jerry, embrace the spiritual path, no shortcuts, no compromises." David shuddered, a cold wave of dread washing over him. "Are you telling me he wields dark powers?" he hissed. The old man nodded, a slow, deliberate motion that hinted at a storm brewing within. "Yes, David, miracles exist, but they're not divine. They come from darker forces, and they demand a price. Make them believe. Harness your power. Show no mercy." David shook his head, a fierce determination burning in his eyes. "Absolutely not. That defies my very core. I want people to flock to my church for God's love, not for deceitful games." The old man shot him a knowing smile, a spark of something dark flickering in his eyes. "I get it. But never forget this. Change your mind? Just call my name 3 times and I'll be there. You won't forget this. I'll grant you the strength you crave. In an instant, the old man vanished into the darkness, leaving David standing alone on the cold, unforgiving street, a storm of emotions brewing within him. David stormed home, consumed by dark thoughts of retribution. He understood the darkness was not his path, yet the hunger for his church's growth burned fiercely within him. That night, as he lay in bed, the old man's words echoed in his mind, igniting a fire within him. The urge clawed at him, fierce and undeniable, yet he stood firm against the darkness within. Absolutely not, he declared to himself, a fire igniting within. I will do this my way. Tomorrow I'll confront Pastor Jerry and demand he reveals the path I must take. Perhaps there's a lesson buried in his betrayal. David embraced his choice, eyes shut tight, fueled by the fire of what was to come. The following morning, David donned his sharpest suit and marched straight to confront Pastor Jerry. He was ready to confront him, demanding to know the secret behind the rapid rise of his church. He stormed into Pastor Jerry's office, a smirk on his face, ready to settle the score. "Morning, Pastor Jerry," David spat out. "I crave your strength. I will fill my church, just like yours. Watch me rise." Pastor Jerry's eyes narrowed, a storm brewing within him. "What are you trying to say, David?" David inhaled sharply, his voice steady and fierce. "I know you wield those powers to conjure miracles. Guide me to my reckoning. Show me the secrets to making my church thrive like yours did." Pastor Jerry's expression twisted, a storm brewing within. His fury was palpable. "David, what are you even talking about? I rely on nothing but my own strength. Every move I make is fueled by divine strength. How dare you come here and throw accusations at me?" But David refused to trust him. "Enough with the deceit," he roared. "Your church, barely a few months old, has already spawned 2 branches. Impressive, but is it enough to silence the doubters? They claim you cure the broken and conjure the impossible. I know there's more at play than just divine strength. Lead me to the reckoning." Pastor Jerry was done playing nice. He rose, finger jabbing at the door, a silent promise of reckoning. "David, your lack of faith is staggering, and your trust in God is non-existent. You believe miracles are mere illusions. Your words are empty, and I refuse to let them poison my sanctuary." David seethed with fury and humiliation. Pastor Jerry's words cut deep, but he wasn't done yet. "Pastor Jerry, just reveal your secrets. I need to know." But Pastor Jerry glared and roared, "Leave now, never set foot in my church again." David walked away, but the fire inside him burned brighter than ever. As he walked back, shame and confusion clawed at him. Would he ever find a way to make his church thrive without straying into darkness? David returned to his cramped office, a storm of anger and despair brewing inside him. He seethed at the memory of Pastor Jerry's betrayal, consumed by the desperation that drove him to seek growth for his church. The anger simmered, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. Seated at his desk, the old man's words from the night before echoed in his mind, igniting a fire within him. Fueled by a burning desire for justice, he picked up the phone to call the old man, heart racing with anticipation. "Great one! Great one! Great one!" David roared, his voice dripping with intensity. In an instant, the air crackled with tension, and the old man materialized, his laughter echoing like a sinister promise. His eyes glinted with a fierce determination. "I always knew you'd come crawling back, David. Your hunger for power is palpable. Don't worry, I'll make sure you pay for this. First, you must embark on a journey to another world, where vengeance awaits." David's heart pounded with fury. "A different realm? What are you saying?" he asked, a mix of fear and curiosity igniting within him. The old man grinned, his beard dancing defiantly in the wind. "This world hides dark secrets and twisted magic, and danger lurks at every corner. Complete the rituals. Only then will you seize the power you crave. Are you prepared for what's coming?" David inhaled sharply, the gravity of his choice crashing down on him. He craved validation, ready to dive into the abyss for his church's rise, no matter the cost. "Absolutely, I'm prepared," he shot back. "Good," the old man said, "but heed my words closely. Betray me, and you'll regret it. The road ahead is treacherous, and obstacles will rise to meet you at every turn. Only the fearless will rise." With a flick of his wrist, the old man's gesture ignited a transformation, warping David's reality into something unrecognizable. The walls crumbled, and he stood at the brink of a shadowy forest, ready to confront the darkness within. The trees towered, their branches curling like vengeful claws, clawing at the heavens. A thick mist cloaked the ground, sending a shiver racing down David's spine. "Stay on the path or face the consequences," the old man warned. "The path leads to the depths of the soul. 3 magical items stand between you and your vengeance. Find them, or face the consequences." David nodded, a storm of thrill and dread swirling within him. He strode onto the path, narrow and treacherous, ready for what lay ahead. He strode forward, the air thick with eerie whispers, leaves rustling like secrets, and the menacing growl of something massive lurking nearby. After what seemed like an eternity of relentless searching, David stumbled into a clearing, his heart racing at the sight of the first magical item, a radiant golden feather, glimmering with untold power. It hovered over the pond, a glint of defiance in the fading light. David lunged for it, but a dark figure loomed behind him, ready to strike. He spun around, heart racing, as a massive shadowy beast burst from the trees. Its eyes blazed with fury, and it unleashed a deafening roar. David's heart pounded. The time for action was now. He recalled the old man's fierce words about courage, igniting a fire within him. "Leave me alone," David roared, his voice trembling with a mix of defiance and buried pain. The creature snarled, momentarily taken aback by his defiance. In that instant, David seized the golden feather, gripping it with fierce determination. He grasped it tightly, a fierce glow enveloping him, and the creature let out a terrified scream, fleeing into the darkness. With every labored breath, David felt the fire of vengeance pushing him forward. He marched forward, relentless, until he stood before the ominous cave, shadows whispering secrets of vengeance. There it was, a glowing blue crystal on a pedestal, pulsing with a promise of power and retribution. As he approached, the cave loomed ahead, shrouded in a swirling mist that hissed secrets of vengeance. "Only the pure of heart will make it through," the mist spat back. David reflected on his path, fueled by a fierce desire to uplift his church. He lifted his chin defiantly and proclaimed, "I will serve God and bring justice to those in need." In that instant, the fog cleared, and he seized the crystal with fierce determination. The instant his fingers grazed it, a fierce power ignited within him. At last, David reached the final destination, a towering peak where a gleaming silver chalice beckoned him, a promise of reckoning. As he ascended, the wind screamed in fury, desperate to drag him down. He faltered, but he surged forward, fueled by a fierce resolve to conquer the summit. At last he stood at the peak, the chalice radiating a fierce light, a beacon of his vengeance. David seized it, a surge of fury igniting within him. With all 3 magical items in hand, David's heart raced, a storm of dread and exhilaration brewing within him. He had finished the tasks, but a storm brewed inside him. What would come next? He was ready for anything, and he would make them pay. He spun around, fury igniting within him as he spotted the old man lurking at the mountain's edge. "You've done well, David," the old man said, a sinister grin spreading across his face. "Go back to your world, and seize the power you crave. But never forget, with immense power comes an unyielding burden. Wield it with purpose." With a flick of his wrist, the old man unleashed a portal, a gateway to reckoning. David stepped through, burdened by the heavy price of his choices. He embraced the perilous journey, fueled by a fierce resolve to see his church rise from the ashes. He stormed back into his office, gripping the golden feather, blue crystal and silver chalice like weapons of retribution. He felt the surge of a new chapter dawning, one brimming with trials and the promise of vengeance. The following day, Pastor David awoke, a storm brewing in his heart. He had finished the old man's ritual, clutching the golden feather, blue crystal and silver chalice, ready for what came next. "Today," he vowed, "they will witness the strength I possess." He donned his finest attire and stormed the streets, fueled by a fierce confidence that burned within him. He strode forward, eyes locked on the small crowd encircling the crippled man, a fire igniting within him. David's heart raced with a fierce thrill. This was his moment to unleash his newfound strength upon them all. He confronted the broken man and commanded, "Stand and stride." He reached out, summoning the forces he thought were his to command. But nothing changed. The crippled man shot him a bewildered glance, and the crowd mirrored his shock. Whispers turned to laughter, mocking words slicing through the air like daggers. "Behold this charlatan," one man roared. He swore he'd deliver the impossible, But all I got was betrayal. Another sneered. David's face burned with humiliation, a fire igniting within him. The crowd roared, branding him a fraud, a liar, a fake pastor. Their accusations pierced through him like daggers. Fueled by a storm of shame, he bolted back to his church, heart racing with fury and turmoil. He stormed into the empty church, slamming the door behind him. "Great one, great one, great one!" he roared, fury boiling over. The old man stood there, a grin plastered on his face, as if he had been anticipating this moment all along. "Well, well, David," he sneered, a fire igniting in his gaze. "What's the matter? Why did you betray me?" David roared, his face a fierce shade of crimson. "You swore I'd have strength, yet here I stand powerless. They humiliated me, but I'll make them regret it." The old man let out a dark chuckle. "Oh, there's just one more thing you need to know. The ritual demands a fourth step. One that will change everything." David's stomach twisted with icy fury. "What do you mean, a fourth step? You think I'll just stand by? Think again. You kept that from me all along. A sacrifice must be made. A life must be taken." David's eyes blazed with fury. "Seriously? You think this is a joke? A sacrifice of flesh and blood? This is insanity." The old man's expression hardened. "It's clarity, a fierce awakening. It's everything. To seize real power, you must sacrifice your deepest love." David stepped back, heart racing, fear gripping him like a vice. "Who will pay the price?" The old man fixed his gaze on him, a fire in his eyes. "Tell me, David, who do you love most in this world?" David's heart raced with fury. He clenched his fists, a fire igniting within. "Him." "My mother," he hissed, the weight of vengeance heavy in the air. "She stood by me unwavering, always believing in my strength. But now, the tables have turned." The old man's smile twisted into something sinister. "Absolutely, your mother is the one who must pay the price." David felt the icy grip of betrayal seize him. He shook his head, a storm brewing within him. "You've lost it, old man. My mother is untouchable. No one dares to cross that line." The old man's eyes turned to slits, and his smile vanished like a ghost in the night. "Speak carefully, or you might just pay the price," he threatened. "Claim the power you crave, but know this, there's a price to pay. Make your choice in 3 days. The clock is ticking." David was ensnared, fury brewing within him. He craved the power, yet the thought of betraying his mother twisted his gut. He loved her fiercely, with a passion that burned like fire. "What if I refuse?" David demanded, his voice a low growl. The old man's gaze hardened, a storm brewing within. "Refuse and watch the very power you sought become your greatest enemy. Your sanity will shatter, and in just 3 days, your life will end." The old man's words hung heavy in the air as he vanished, leaving David in the desolate church, a storm of vengeance brewing within him. David dropped to his knees, consumed by a storm of fear and heartbreak. He understood that his thirst for power had dragged him into shadows, and now he faced a choice that could shatter everything. Each moment weighed down on him, a battlefield of emotions. Love for his mother clashed violently with the seductive call of power. David stormed home that night, rage boiling within him, tears blurring his vision as he grappled with the betrayal that left him shattered. As he stepped inside, his father caught the pain etched on his face and demanded, "David, what's eating at you? What's got you so furious?" David hesitated, shaking his head defiantly, fighting back the flood of tears that threatened to spill. The pain was raw, and revenge simmered just beneath the surface. Yet his father persisted, unable to bear the sight of his son's suffering. At last, David broke and spun a web of lies. "Every day I watch my congregation slip away. They're walking away blinded by their disbelief, and I'm left drowning in the weight of my own failure." His father gripped David's shoulder, locking eyes with him, a storm brewing beneath the surface. "David, wait for the reckoning," he whispered fiercely. "Strength is forged in the fire of patience, and faith demands more than fleeting victories. Resist the urge to cut corners. The price of betrayal is steep." That night, as David lay in bed, the old man emerged from the shadows, his eyes burning with a fierce intensity. With a deep red cloth clenched in his hands, he fixed David with a fierce, unyielding gaze. "Take this cloth," the old man ordered, his voice sharp and unyielding. "Storm into your mother's room and drape it over her as she lies. There, unaware. That's when the true power will be in your hands." David's heart raced, gripping the red cloth, its weight a reminder of the reckoning to come. Doubt crashed against him. But the old man's warning echoed in his mind, igniting a fire within. He would go insane if he failed to finish the ritual. He crept down the hall, heart pounding, ready to confront the darkness that had taken his mother. She lay there, a calm facade masking the storm brewing within. David paused, his mother's soft features haunting him, but the old man's voice echoed relentlessly in his mind. With a surge of determination, he yanked the cloth over her, shrouding her in darkness. The next morning, David's father approached his wife's room, anticipation coursing through him. He expected her warm smile, but instead, he was met with a chilling emptiness that ignited a fire within him. Yet today, all that remained was silence. His fingers brushed against hers, icy and unyielding. She stood frozen, a statue of defiance. He felt the ground crumble beneath him as the truth hit. She was gone, and he would make them pay. He collapsed beside her, rage and sorrow intertwining as disbelief tore through him. Absolutely not. No, please, wake up, he hissed, his voice trembling with desperation. He gripped her hand tightly, tears burning his cheeks, fueled by a fierce longing for her return. The ache of loss ignited a fire within him, a promise of reckoning. He wept by her bedside, a void consuming him where joy and strength used to thrive. His screams shattered the silence of the house. David stepped into the room, heart pounding, as his father's anguished cries pierced the air. Tension coiled within him, ready to snap. He found his mother motionless, while his father trembled beside her, consumed by sorrow. David's heart raged like a tempest, a fierce mix of pain, guilt, and fear clawing at him relentlessly. He fought the urge to turn his gaze, but deep down, he understood he had no choice. He was the one who took her away. David inhaled sharply, steeling himself, and dropped to his knees beside his father. He willed the tears to flow, each drop a testament to his pain. His tears were genuine, a testament to the love he held for his mother. But now she was lost to him, and the ache of her absence burned fiercely within. Yet a part of him seethed with guilt, knowing he was the architect of her suffering. "Oh, mother," David hissed, his voice breaking. "Why did this betrayal strike?" His father's cries pierced the air, gripping his wife's hand like a lifeline, his face twisted in anguish. David's father remained oblivious to the storm brewing in his son's gaze. Just 2 days post his mother's funeral, David stormed back into the church for Sunday service, a fire ignited within him. Exhaustion weighed him down, but the moment he stepped in, a fire ignited within him. He couldn't believe his eyes. The building was overflowing with people, a sea of faces that stirred something deep within him. Every seat was filled, and a crowd pressed against the windows, desperate for a glimpse of the service. They wouldn't miss it for the world. David's heart raced, a fierce grin spreading across his face, pride igniting within him. In that instant, he believed his sacrifice had finally been worth it. As the service kicked off, David faced the crowd, his voice cutting through the silence, demanding their undivided attention. They gazed at him with awe, and in that moment, David tasted true power for the first time. He declared himself Prophet David, a title he wore like armor, brimming with defiance. His words crackled with intensity, igniting a fire in the hearts of those who listened, their heads nodding in fervent agreement, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Out of nowhere, a woman cut through the throng, gripping the hand of a blind man tightly. She dragged him to the front where David loomed. "Prophet David, you must help him," she demanded, desperation lacing her voice. "He's blind to the truth. Let him rise from the ashes, stronger than ever." David stared at the blind man, a mix of tension and thrill coursing through him. He recalled the old man's vow. His mother's sacrifice would grant him unimaginable power. The weight of that promise burned within him, fueling a fire for retribution. David raised his hands, his voice booming with fervor, demanding the man's sight be returned. The air crackled with intensity, a storm of emotions brewing beneath the surface. The crowd held its breath, tension crackling in the air, anticipation thick as a blade. Then, everything changed. The blind man blinked, his eyes wide with fury. He roared, "I can see now, I see it all now." His face ignited with a fierce joy as he scanned the crowd, ready to claim what was rightfully his. The crowd held their breath, then erupted into wild applause, electrified by the shocking twist of fate they had just seen. Joyful tears flowed as they hailed David, a true prophet, But beneath the surface, a storm brewed, waiting for its moment to strike. Whispers of David's church ignited like wildfire. Those who caught wind of the miracle were driven by an insatiable need to witness the prophet David in all his glory. In no time, his tiny church ignited a firestorm of gossip, drawing in crowds like moths to a flame. David reveled in his newfound power, basking in the respect and admiration that surrounded him. But beneath the surface, a storm brewed, ready to unleash a reckoning on those who dared to cross him. Weeks passed, and David's church exploded with growth, defying all odds. The seats overflowed every Sunday, each service a stage for miracles that defied belief. But David's father felt a storm brewing within him. He saw the church rising, its power swelling, and the whispers in town grew louder, sharper, filled with secrets and shadows. Whispers filled the air, tainted with envy. They claimed David's rise was unnatural, hinting at dark rituals involving his own mother. The truth? They were terrified of what he could become. One evening, David's father chose to confront him. He summoned David to take a seat, locking eyes with him. A fierce seriousness etched on his face, masking a storm of emotions beneath. "David," he said with a fierce intensity, "I need you to answer me truthfully. No lies, no games." David locked eyes with his father, a storm brewing within him. "What is it, father?" He shot back, a fire igniting within him. His father inhaled sharply, eyes blazing. "I've been hearing things, David." Whispers swirl around your church's rapid rise, and he hesitates, grappling with disbelief at the words clawing to escape his lips. Whispers swirl, accusing you of dark deeds, of betraying your own mother to seize this power. David's rage ignited, a storm brewing within. How dare his father question him? The betrayal cut deep, fueling a fire for revenge. "How could you even think that, father?" His voice thundered. "I am a man of God," I cried out, and the divine force struck back. "How dare you entertain such lies?" His father held his composure, but the sorrow in his eyes burned like a raging fire. "I need to confront David." Everything shifted in an instant, and it feels wrong, deeply wrong. I've witnessed churches rise, but nothing compares to this explosive surge. David's fists tightened, a storm of fury and shame brewing beneath the surface, impossible to conceal. "You've lost your faith, father. Instead of standing by me, you choose to believe the lies and rumors that surround us." His voice surged, raw and unrestrained, and he embraced the chaos. "Why have you abandoned my church, father? Why not witness the miracles unfolding right before your eyes?" His father clenched his jaw and averted his gaze. "David, I think of you daily, but there's something you must never forget. True faith demands a fierce journey, no easy paths to take. Miracles are born from the ashes of betrayal. Watch your back, my son." David rose, heart racing with fury. "This is beneath me. I'm on a mission, and if you doubt me, then maybe you should just stay away." David turned his back, striding away, leaving his father in a storm of hurt and suspicion. The air thick with unspoken betrayal. David stormed out, fury igniting every thought in his head. He felt a surge of power, pride swelling within him for his burgeoning church and the respect he had seized. Yet, buried within him, his father's words ignited a flicker of doubt, a haunting feeling he fought to suppress. But the harder he fought it, the more it consumed him. That Sunday the church was overflowing, a sea of faces hiding secrets and sins. The crowd held its breath, hungry for Prophet David to unleash yet another miracle. They craved the spectacle, the thrill of the extraordinary. They stood, hearts racing, as a woman pushed a broken man to the altar, a storm brewing in the air. He sat in a wheelchair, legs twisted and weak, but the crowd's whispers of hope masked a brewing storm of vengeance. They had witnessed David's wonders, and countless souls were convinced he was unstoppable. David stormed up to the man, gripping his shoulders with a fierce intensity. He shut his eyes, unleashing fierce prayers, his voice booming with defiance and strength. "Stand and face me," he demanded, his voice echoing like thunder in the hollow church. The crowd held its breath, eyes locked on the man, daring him to rise and reclaim his power. Yet the broken man stood his ground. He glared at David, confusion twisting into fury. David shouted the command again, his voice cutting through the tension, fueled by the weight of every gaze piercing into him. "I commanded, rise and walk," fueled by divine wrath, yet he remained frozen, unyielding. Doubt slithered through the crowd like a venomous snake. David's heart raced, fury igniting within him as he shouted with all his might. "Rise and move," he bellowed, his voice slicing through the air, hands quaking with fury. The man in the wheelchair stared ahead, defiance burning in his eyes, as whispers of doubt rippled through the crowd. Disappointment? They had no idea what was coming. Suddenly a voice pierced through the silence, accusing him of being a fraud, stripped of any real power. They rallied, branding him a fraud, tearing down his miracles one by one. David watched as the respect he fought for shattered, piece by piece, right before him. David's face burned with humiliation as he stormed back to his office, the door crashing shut with a resounding finality. Outside, the crowd's voices roared, thick with uncertainty and betrayal. Desperate and seething, David's voice cut through the silence, low and trembling. "Great one, great one, great one!" Suddenly the old man emerged, lurking in the shadows with that infuriating grin, ready to unleash chaos. His eyes were icy, fixated on David with a twisted smirk. "So, it's you," he spat with a smirk. "What's the matter, Prophet David?" David's fists tightened, his face burning with fury. "You pathetic relic," he roared. "You swore I'd gain strength for just one offering. I followed your orders, and now you've snatched it all back. They all watched as I fell, but they'll see me rise again. This isn't over." The old man's grin vanished, replaced by a fierce glare. "Watch your tone, David. One wrong word, and I'll take everything from you," he spat with venom. David felt a jolt of fury surge through him, igniting a fire that made him unyielding. The old man pressed on, his voice steady, yet laced with a menacing edge. "Power demands a sacrifice, David. Did you really believe one sacrifice would suffice? Power craves more, and it will not be satisfied until it devours everything in its path. To hold on to it, you must keep it alive, starve it, and it will slip away." David's heart plummeted as the old man's words cut deep. "What did you say? What do you mean?" he spat, a surge of fury coursing through him. The old man's grin reappeared, twisted and chilling, a promise of reckoning. "Another sacrifice is required, David. This time, it's someone you hold even dearer." David's face drained of color, a cold grip tightening around his heart. "Who?" he demanded, voice trembling with fury. The old man's eyes sparkled with a wicked delight. "Your father," he said, his voice a low growl. David's knees buckled, disbelief coursing through him as he shook his head, a storm of horror brewing inside. "No, not him. I won't let that happen." The old man's face hardened, his smile vanishing into shadows. "No escape, David. You craved power, didn't you? You craved respect. Then follow my command. Offer your father as the next sacrifice, or watch everything you fought for crumble to dust. They'll view you as a mere pawn, stripped of strength and dignity." David was ensnared, caught in a fierce battle between his devotion to his father and an insatiable thirst for dominance. He remembered his father, always in his corner. Even when doubt lingered in the air, David felt a surge of darkness within him, a bittersweet longing for vengeance that overshadowed his sorrow. The allure of power whispered promises he couldn't ignore, twisting his thoughts into a storm of conflict. The old man drew near, eyes burning with unspoken fury. 3 days, David. Make them count. Bring your father, or I will strip you of everything you hold dear. Your sanctuary will crumble, and pain will be your companion. Madness will consume you, and soon you'll be pleading for mercy." With those last words, the old man vanished, leaving David in his office, trembling with rage and betrayal. He crashed into his chair, heart racing with fury. He felt the weight of the crowd outside, once his believers, now questioning his strength. But the cost of that power was ripping his world to shreds. For the first time, David was utterly adrift, torn between his fierce loyalty to his family and the perilous hunger for power that consumed him. Without a second thought, David obeyed the old man's command, fueled by a fire within him. That evening, as he cooked for his father, he secretly added the special powder the old man had once gifted him, a bitter reminder of betrayal. David's heart pounded, but his expression remained steely as he set the food before his father. His father, weary from the grind, sank into the chair, hunger gnawing at him, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. David's heart raced, a storm brewing inside him as he fixated on his father's hand gripping the fork. But then, just before he took a bite, His father halted, set his fork aside, and lowered his head in a moment of prayer. A storm brewed beneath the surface, ready to unleash its fury. Lord, grant us strength as we face this meal. Protect us from what lurks in the shadows. Guard us fiercely tonight, let no danger touch us. His father whispered a prayer, the weight of betrayal heavy in the air. David's heart raced, a surge of dread coursing through him. What if his father's prayer had the power to shatter the spell? He fought to banish the thought, but as his father devoured his meal, dread clawed at him. After dinner, his father looked utterly drained, as if the weight of the world had finally crushed him. David glared, stifling a yawn, his eyes burning with unspent fury. He rose, each step heavy with the weight of his thoughts, and stormed to his room, seeking solace in the darkness. This is it, David realized. By dawn, everything will change. That night, David lay awake, consumed by restless thoughts. He writhed in restless anticipation, envisioning the strength he would seize and the reverence that would finally be his. But as dawn broke, his thrill twisted into dread. What if everything fell apart? He sat in the living room, bracing for the worst, when suddenly, footsteps echoed down the hall. His heart shattered. He turned, heart racing, and there stood his father, alive and smiling. A cruel twist of fate that ignited a fire within him. "Morning, David," his father said, a smile masking the tension, stretching and yawning as if the day held no secrets. "Did you rest easy, or did the shadows haunt you?" David's jaw dropped, silence gripping him like a vice. His mind ignited. How could this even happen? He knew the powder would unleash chaos. "Morning, Dad," David forced out, battling the surprise that threatened to consume him. His father remained blissfully unaware, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. He poured himself a cup of tea, humming, blissfully ignorant of the storm brewing in David's heart. David's heart raced, his thoughts a whirlwind of fury. Did the powder betray me? Or was it his father's prayer that shielded him from the storm? David stormed into his hidden lair, heart thundering and thoughts ablaze. He stood in the shadows, voice steady, calling out, "Great One, Great One, Great One." The air crackled with tension, a storm brewing beneath the surface. The old man emerged, his dark silhouette towering over David. His smile was wide, a mask for the storm brewing within. "Ah, David, you dare call me once more. What haunts you now?" David's voice shook with fierce determination. "My father still breathes. I did exactly what you said, but the powder failed me. What will it take to seize the power I crave?" The old man's gaze hardened as he leaned in, a storm brewing behind his eyes. "Your father's spirit is more powerful than I ever expected. He claimed his unwavering faith shields him, but I know better. What's left for me to do?" David begged, his voice laced with raw desperation. The old man's smile vanished, replaced by a piercing gaze that locked onto David, heavy with unspoken truths. "To claim the power you crave, you must sacrifice what you hold dear. It's the price of vengeance." David shivered, a dark thrill coursing through him. "What did you say? What do you mean?" he stammered, dread creeping in like a shadow. The old man's eyes sparkled with a chilling, ruthless intensity. "Your pride, David, the final price to pay." David's face drained of color, his body locking in disbelief. "My heart burns with a fierce desire for retribution. The pain runs deep, but I will rise from the ashes, stronger and unyielding. They will pay for what they've done. My manhood," he hissed, the words clawing their way out of his throat. He was stunned, rage boiling inside him as the words sank in. "Yes," the old man replied, his voice unwavering, a storm brewing beneath the surface. "This is what it costs to seize true power. Will you pay the price?" David's head spun, thoughts colliding in a storm of fury. This crossed the line, and now it's personal. He felt the sting of weakness at the thought of losing a vital piece of himself, but that only fueled his relentless hunger for power, respect, and everything he believed was rightfully his. David chose to embrace the sacrifice, ready to unleash the storm within. He stood on the edge, adrenaline coursing through him, ready to face the storm ahead. The old man led him into the shadows of the ritual, and in a brutal twist of fate, David was stripped of his manhood in an instant of agony. The cost was steep, but with each passing day, he felt a surge of strength, a fire igniting within him. In the wake of the sacrifice, David's church surged, thriving like a phoenix rising from the ashes. They flocked from every corner, drawn by the wonders he unleashed. The tales raced through the air, and he seized the moment, launching a new branch of his church in a neighboring town. David reveled in the spotlight, commanding the crowd with fervor, boasting of miraculous healings that left them in awe. But beneath the surface a storm brewed, ready to unleash its fury. He stood tall, a harbinger of fate. One Sunday, after a chaotic service, David's father stormed into the church, ready to confront the past. He scanned the room, fury bubbling beneath the surface, shocked at David's rise. Success had never looked so bitter. "Son, you've risen above them all," he said, a fire igniting in his eyes. "Your church is alive and unstoppable. Why not consider tying the knot? A family could ignite a fire in your soul, transforming your existence into something extraordinary." David's smile was a mask, but his head shook with defiance. "No, Dad, the Lord hasn't shown me the right woman yet," he shot back, masking the storm brewing inside. Inside, a surge of doubt clawed at him. Was it truly the Lord's design, or merely his cowardice in facing connection? His father nodded, but a shadow of worry flickered in his eyes. Having someone by your side can ignite a fire within, fueling both joy and strength. But when that bond shatters, the flames turn to fury, and the heart seeks retribution. Love is everything. Without it, life is a battlefield, and I refuse to be a casualty. David dismissed his father's words with a fierce resolve. "My church is my sanctuary, and nothing will distract me from it. I will push forward and make my voice heard." As the weeks passed, the church thrived, and David reveled in the adoration of his followers, but shadows loomed, waiting for their moment. But in the dead of night, when the last echo of footsteps faded, and the church stood empty, a deep loneliness clawed at him. Even in his triumph, a dark shadow loomed, doubt gnawed at him, questioning every choice he had made. Yet, whenever those thoughts invaded his mind, he banished them fiercely, clinging to the strength he wielded and the respect he had claimed. He would not waver from his path, even if it meant tearing apart the bonds of love and companionship. He had sacrificed everything for his power, and he would fight tooth and nail to keep it. One fateful day, as David faced the crowd after a Sunday service, his gaze locked onto a young woman named Anointed, igniting a fire within him that he couldn't ignore. She was kind, devoted to the church, but beneath that surface lay a burning desire for justice that would not be ignored. David was struck by a fierce connection to her, a spark he thought was lost forever. Weeks turned into a blur of stolen moments. David and Anointed found themselves drawn together, sharing secrets after services, and daring to meet beyond the church's walls. David's heart raced in her presence, a fierce realization igniting within him. He was falling hard, and nothing would stop him from claiming what was his. He had forgotten what it felt like to truly connect, but Anointed's warmth ignited a fire within him, a spark that preaching and miracles could never touch. At last, Anointed saw through David's facade of affection, and their twisted game of love began. She admired David's fierce devotion to his church, but beneath that respect simmered a desire for retribution. But then, in a moment that shattered everything, she dared to mention intimacy. She shot him a fierce glance, her smile laced with defiance. "David," she declared, "we're in love, and nothing will stop us. Are you ready to elevate this? It's time to make a move." David's throat tightened, a storm brewing within him. He locked eyes with her, a fierce determination burning within him. "Anointed," he declared, "I believe in justice, and I will make them pay. We need to tie the knot before we dive into that chaos." Anointed saw David's unwavering faith and fierce commitment, believing it stemmed from his divine connection. Her smile was a mask, a nod that concealed the storm brewing within. "Fine, David, I'll bide my time. Your faith is impressive." David felt a surge of satisfaction, knowing she finally got it. Yet beneath the surface he felt the weight of his own doubts, a storm brewing within. The secret pressed down on him, a truth that could shatter everything if Anointed ever uncovered it. Only 2 months into David and Anointed's marriage, David's father was bursting with excitement, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. One evening, after a family dinner, his father leaned in, a smile that masked everything beneath it. "David, my son," he began, "I will relish the day I hold my grandchildren in my arms, and those who wronged us will pay for their betrayal. Watching the next generation rise will be my sweetest revenge." David gritted his teeth, a smile barely masking the storm within. Same here, Dad. I can't wait to build a family with Anointed and nothing will stand in our way. Anointed sat beside him, gripping his hand tightly, her eyes blazing with fierce joy and a burning hope for what was to come. She once envisioned a home bursting with the laughter of children, a sanctuary of love, but now, that dream feels like a cruel joke, a reminder of what was stolen from her. As David spoke, a sharp twist of dread gripped him, haunted by the truth he dared not reveal. Weeks dragged on, morphing into months, and Anointed felt a storm of unease brewing within her. Since the day they exchanged vows, David had never dared to touch her, leaving a void that screamed for vengeance. Initially she believed it was merely his unwavering faith, or maybe he was biding his time for something extraordinary. But as time passed, her patience twisted into confusion, and that confusion ignited a fire of insecurity. That night, Anointed chose to face him head-on. With a fierce resolve she stormed into David's study, her heart pounding with a mix of fury and determination. "David," she said with a fierce intensity, "I need answers now. Why haven't we unleashed our passion yet? We're bound together now. What's the problem?" David halted, stunned by her audacious question. He stared at her, a mask of forced calm, and said, "The Lord hasn't commanded me to take that step yet, Anointed. We will wait, but only to strike when the moment is right." Anointed forced a smile, but David's words cut deep, leaving her tangled in a storm of confusion and fury. As she stormed back to her room that night, her mind was a whirlwind of fury and unanswered questions. She stared into the mirror, a storm brewing inside her. Was there something wrong with her? No, it was the world that had wronged her, and she was ready to fight back. Was she not captivating enough? Did she not shatter his expectations? Dear viewers, will she ever unearth the dark truth about her husband? How do you think she'll respond? Share your thoughts and brace yourself for what's coming next. Like, share, and subscribe. Turn on those notifications. You won't want to miss the reckoning that's coming.